the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Comparing the king of Tyre to the devil, Ezekiel said, "Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee." From Ezekiel's account, Satan, who created sin, was in the Garden of Eden. Satan then is the same personage called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Consistent with the botanical setting, the tree of knowledge of good and evil was the embodiment of the devil himself. The Genesis author made a clear distinction between the physical trees and the two metaphoric trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The forbidden tree was not being described as being pleasant to the sight or good for food. Later, the devil gave that impression. The Bible did not say the two metaphoric trees were planted by God. It merely reported that both trees were also in the garden. While the physical trees were for the sustenance of the body that came from the earth, the metaphoric trees were about spiritual life and death. God told man to dress and keep the garden. And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. Adam was created outside the garden and was employed to dress and keep it. This contemplated that someone already wanted to take it away. The reason for the command to keep the garden was that the devil was already there. The only thing Adam had to do was to obey God by not listening and digesting the produce of the devil, knowledge. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die, spiritually. Eating from the forbidden tree would bring immediate spiritual death. Take note of the contrasting facts. Adam was told to dress the trees in the garden, but stay away from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Adam was told to eat from all the trees, but stay away from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Here is the fact. The trees and the forbidden tree were not the same. Let's listen to the conversation between Eve and the tree that has knowledge about good God and evil himself. Devil: hath God said, he shall not eat of every tree of the garden? In other words, did God say you are not to listen to me? Here is Eve's response. We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God had said, he shall not eat of it, neither shall he touch it. So Eve made a distinction between the fruit trees and the tree that bears knowledge. The devil continues, God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. In other words, if you listen and obey me, you will be like spirit beings, who at the time were the only ones who knew that God was good and the devil evil. Your eyes will be open. Observe, the devil has moved the conversation away from the physical trees to himself, knowledge of good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat. Being deceived, Eve saw that the tree of knowledge of good and evil was now like the trees that were good for food and pleasant to the eyes, in addition to making one wise. Here's a summary of the deception. Eve would not need the physical trees to sustain the body. Eve would not need the tree of life because she could be like the spirit beings. Ezekiel identified the devil as the one in the Garden of Eden, and John confirms the devil was the one who deceived the world. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent from Genesis, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the world. The opposite of the tree of life cannot be the physical trees, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil, death. Needless to say, Jesus is the tree of life in the book of Genesis and the same tree of life in the book of Revelation. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have rights to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, and remember to hit that bell.